You are listening to the Bat Flip Podcast, a baseball podcast from Belly Up Sports and the Belly Up Podcast Network. Here are your hosts, Damian and Matt.
Hello, everybody, and welcome into the Bat Flip Podcast. My name is Matt, and I'm here with Damian today, and I hope everyone's had a great week. How are you doing, Damian?
I am doing all right. We got some blockbuster moves happening this week, and a little bit of sadness going on in the baseball world. But other than that, I mean, the off season this week was a little encouraging because it's a week that we actually had some major moves happening.
Yeah, for sure. It's been a very interesting week. A lot of big time moves. But first, we can talk about something tragic that happened this week as former Dodgers manager and Major League Baseball 1997 Hall of Fame inductee Tommy Lasorda, the manager, passed away. He was 22nd all time in wins, a two-time World Series champion. Um, a two-time manager of the year, and what he says was his best accomplishment, the 2000 manager of the Olympic gold medal team in Sydney. So, our condolences to Tommy Lasorda's family and to all the Dodger fans. And I'll let you, since you're the big Dodger fan here, Damien, I'll let you talk about him for just a minute.
Yeah, I mean, in not only in Dodger baseball, but in the baseball world, Tommy Lasorda is well known. He's a guy who is probably the nicest guy you'll ever meet. I mean, I know me and my dad went to a fan fest. I want to say it was like 2017-ish. It was right before the Astros World Series thing, so yeah, 2017. And on his way up to the stage, Tommy sort of stopped and was saying hi to all the fans he could right there. Just and I'm having conversations with them. And he got up there and he gave this speech that to this day, still thinking about it, gives me chills. Um, and you just hear the stories, the resounding stories from not only Dodger players but just players around the league about how they could have one 5-minute conversation with Tommy and he'll remember every aspect about it and always address you and remember those the next time you guys are having a conversation. So it's a very sad thing, and it's gonna be sad not seeing him at the ballpark next to the Dodger Stadium dugout, or the Dodger dugout, I should say, and taking a nap in the fifth inning, saying that the game's boring. Uh, but you could count on that. I mean, he was there at a certain time every day, and then he would take a little nap during the game. But I mean, he was always there, and he was always a character around the Dodger Stadium. You could always see, and players would always have some story about him that day, yelling at him and saying something from the on deck circle. So
Yeah, that's good stuff. I really hated to see that, and obviously Tommy Lasorda was just a great ambassador for the game, and he's made his mark on Major League Baseball, and he'll always be remembered for it. So, it's definitely sad to see him go, but at this point we can celebrate how great of a life he lived and how great of a ambassador for the sport that he was with the Dodgers.
absolutely.
So, all right. Well, now we can move on to some stuff that's not quite as sad for us. As we'll look at a giant trade this week happened in Major League Baseball. As Francisco Lindor, the shortstop for the Indians, and we've talked about it a million times that he was on the trade block and has been for a while. He was traded along with Carlos Carrasco, who is an interesting addition to the deal, to the New York Mets for infielder Andres Jimenez, infielder or shortstop Ahmed Rosario, right-handed pitcher Josh Wolf, and outfielder Isaiah Green. So, Damian, what you think about the guys the Mets got?
Yeah, the Mets. I mean, they got their guy. They got their Mookie Betts per se here, and Francisco Lindor. We expected him to be traded a lot, and the rumors were all around. Was it going to be the Mets? Was it going to be the Yankees? Was it going to be the Dodgers? Francisco Lindor is in line for a huge payday. I mean, he is a free agent after this season, so it's sort of like the Mookie Betts thing where you're trading him with 1 year of control. You're not sure if you're going to sign an extension, but I mean, with what we talked about with Steve Cohen getting this team, I mean, they've said that they expect to start talking a contract with Lindor in the next couple weeks. Um, and Lindor said he wants that ironed out before spring training ever comes. So that's going to be an interesting thing. Lindor, best shortstop in baseball. He's a fantastic player. Good on base, great defensively. He doesn't strike out too terribly much, walks a decent amount. you know, there's not much to say. I mean, he's just an overall great player. Always known for his bright smile, and so being in New York and not with the Yankees, it's a good little addition for that Mets team. Kind of trying to push the Yankees for the team in New York. The Yankees will always have the history, but the Mets are trying to make a little run at being the best team and the more noticeable team right now, at least. But Carrasco being in this deal is a little interesting. Not only because of what Cookie has meant to that Cleveland organization, going through his cancer battle and everything, but it kind of seemed like it hurt the Indians' return a little bit. Maybe getting off the salary. Carrasco's still a fantastic pitcher his own right. He had 2.91 ERA this year, 3.59 FIP. 10, almost 11 strikeouts per nine. He had a high walk per nine this year, so he lost a little bit of control. But overall, he's going to be a nice fit into that rotation, a number two, number three ish. And we've talked about the Mets probably looking for or being in on Trevor Bauer or whatever. Maybe this is another alternative that lets them use that money for, maybe a George Springer type.
Yeah, this is an interesting deal, and the return that the Indians got, as you mentioned, you would think that a Lindor return would be better, but with that money involvement, with Carrasco being added in there, it probably lessened it a little bit. But they still did get some good pieces. Andres Jimenez is a very young guy. He was a rookie this year, 22-year-old shortstop. He's slotting in right now as Cleveland's number 2 prospect, and he's the number 92 overall, so he's in the top 100 on the fringe. This is according to Fangraphs. Um, the In 2020, he showed some potential. Put up a 263 average, 333 slugging, 398. 333 on base, 398 slugging. The power is not really there. Just 3 home runs. He played in 45 games. He was kind of a utility infielder, bench guy. He put up almost a full win above replacement. He needs to work on his approach a pretty good bit. He had a sub 6% walk rate in above double A. Above single A. So in 2019 in double A, and then the big leagues this year. But future, looking at what he could end up being, above average defense, good base runner, a pretty good, he can spray the ball around the field a little bit, pretty good contact hitter, especially if his strikeout rate comes down some. But he does have limited power. He probably won't ever hit more than 15 home runs in a season. But if he can work on his approach a little bit, that's just fine. Amid Rosario, 25-year-old shortstop. He's probably the headliner in the deal. Either him or Jimenez. He is a former top 5 prospect overall in the big leagues back when he broke in with the Mets. Struggled a little bit for his first couple of years. Finally in 2019, he had especially in the second half, had a little bit of a breakout. Put up almost 3 wins above replacement, 287 average, 323 on base, 432 slugging. He hit 15 home runs. And in 2020, though, it was a struggle. And one thing to look at with him always is going to be his plate discipline. In 2020, it was really not good. He only had a 2.7% walk rate and a 23% strikeout rate. And his numbers, only a 272 on base, 371 slugging. He took a big step back in 2020. So, I'm not super surprised to see the Mets move on here, although Rosario obviously has some kind of talent. And then the other 2 guys are low minors guys. Josh Wolf is a right-handed pitcher. He was a second-round pick in 2019. He's only 20 years old. He's got a pretty good frame, 6'3", 170. He's kind of skinny right now, but he's got some pieces. He's got a nice fastball. Sits mid to upper 90s. Good slider, curveball projections. His command needs to get a little bit better. He's going to slot in as the number 25 prospect in Cleveland, but he projects probably as a reliever. But if he changes up his delivery a little bit, like the Indians have been really good at doing with some guys in the past, he could be your next young Indians pitcher that they figure out how to develop and turn out to be really good. He's got a pretty good upside. He could end up starting at some point. And then Isaiah Green is the last guy in the deal. He was a 2020 compensation pick for the Mets. An outfielder. He got the compensation pick was for Zach Wheeler signing with the Phillies. He's a guy who is a toolsy guy. He has power speed combo. Um, reports say, Fangraphs were saying that he needs a swing change really bad. That his swing is a little bit long, and he's going to have contact issues unless he changes that swing up, and that he needs some seasoning in the outfield as well, and that maybe just some experience out there, work on his arm a little bit. So four pieces that could end up eventually contributing for the Indians. They definitely went with some quantity here, but for this trade, I think the Mets had made a pretty good deal here.
Yeah, it's a really good deal for the Mets. Obviously you're getting Francisco Lindor and Carlos Carrasco, and those guys are going to help you win right now. And Lindor being so young is going to help you for the next 10 years, at least.
If
And
you resign him though, because if
yeah,
the Mets, that's what this deal is gonna depend on, I think.
I expect that Steve Cohen's gonna to re-sign Lindor. I mean, I don't think you do this trade unless you are hell bent on re-signing him, just like kind of the Dodgers were with Mookie Betts when they
Right.
traded. And the Mets really don't have any big contracts on the books. I mean, yeah, you have Jacob DeGrom, but I mean, he's what 32, 33 almost as well. So I mean, he's going to have a high AAV contract, but it's not going to be for many years.
Yeah.
And I mean, you're going to have to pay Conforto coming up in a year or two. But I mean, what really big contract do you have on the books right now? I mean, 4 years for McCann, but you just got off Cespedes. I mean, to me, it just Francisco Lindor is going to be a New York Met. I mean, I don't see any
Yeah.
circumstance that Steve Cohen lets him walk out of the door. You know, um, and for the Indians, I mean, they did something that we all expected, and they had pretty much said that Francisco Lindor was going to be traded this offseason, because he was a free agent, after the season. So you had to get this done now, because if you waited until the trade deadline, you wouldn't even got this package. So for them being handicapped in that scenario, and getting off that cookie contract, if they're trying to save 12 million a year, which I mean, I don't know, I guess that's a big deal to them, but I mean, I think they got a decent return. I'm not a big Rosario fan. He hasn't really proven much, but he does have talent there. If he can make it click, that's the whole part. Jimenez, I mean, he's really nice. I think he's going to be a very solid, a solid major league player that, like you said, he's not going to hit for much power, but a guy who can spray the ball all over the park, and teams can always use that. And then two lottery ticket types, and Josh Wolf and Isaiah Green. I mean, it's all the deal all around in my eyes.
Yeah, and like you said, I agree with you 100% that I think both teams got some pieces here, and and like I say, I think the deal for the Mets is going to depend on re-signing Lindor, but um, I do think it's a salary dump for the Indians a little bit too, because I don't understand. Carrasco's salary is not that big too. It's kind of weird, but obviously he's got unfortunately has the health issues in the past, and you know, they might be a little worried about that. He's also 33 years old, so he's getting on up there for a pitcher, and a guy who's had Tommy John in his past. So I like the deal for both sides. I think for the Mets, you could see a scenario where Lindor ends up not re-signing and Carrasco ends up not really being effective because of his age and his history of injury and obviously medical concerns. So you could see it end up turning out bad for the Mets, but um, obviously I'm not sold on any of the guys that Cleveland got back 100%. I think Jimenez is probably the best chance to be a long-term solid big leaguer. And I mean, you never know with those other two guys. You know, they could end up figuring it out or not. And Cleveland's really good at developing players. So I think,
Absolutely, yeah,
you'll have
that's
to come back and definitely after this year before we see exactly who wins in this deal and in the future we're going to have to look out for those two prospects for the Indians because like I say anytime the Indians get some guy who's got a pretty good frame and has a good fastball and some projection on his other pitches you're scared for it because he's going to end up being good.
absolutely.
So
Well, the next little piece of news, it's in the Indians division, and that's the Chicago White Sox went out there and they signed, best free agent reliever on the market, Liam Hendricks, from the Oakland A's. They signed him to a 3-year, $54 million $54 million deal with a club option The club option is really weird because it's for 15 million, but the buyout is also 15 million. So the deal can turn into a 4 year for 54 million, but no matter what, Liam Hendricks is getting 54 million if it's for 3 years or 4 years. It really doesn't matter. So like me and Matt were talking about it, unless they're just trying to dump salary at the end of that and they don't want it to count against their number, I mean, you expect them to pick that option up because that 15 million would stay on that third year's money books and not their fourth year. He's going to be 32 in February, but this contract for him just set the highest annual average value for a relief pitcher of all time. Um, you know, he started his career as a starter, and then he transitioned to the bullpen really full time in 2015. And then when he got to the Athletics in 2016, he really took kind of another level. Picked up basically a strikeout per nine, and then the past 2 years in 2019, 2020,
It's
I mean,
ridiculous.
absolutely ridiculous years. His strikeout rate jumped to 13%. His walk rate dropped in 2019 to 2%, and then this year to one. Like one walk per nine is absolutely ridiculous. Only allowed a 255 batting average on balls in play, like a ERA of 178 and a Philly independent pitching of a 114. Like that's ridiculous. And in 25 innings, he put up a win, a 1.4 WAR. Like holy cow.
Yeah, yeah. Hendricks that's a great. He's a great pitcher right now, and I think the reason that obviously it's the reason he got the big contract. I mean, that's like you said, that past Wade Davis when he signed a 3-year, $52 million deal for the Rockies a few years ago. But as you saw with that Wade Davis deal, he was an elite reliever. That obviously that was Colorado, but still, um, that contract didn't pan out. Relievers are very fickle, and there's just a lot of uncertainty around relief pitchers. So, but there's no argument to Hendricks' last 2 years, and I think he's going to continue to be good. But this is an interesting deal, and I do think that club option being that way probably has to do with the luxury tax,
Yeah,
because they're going to have some players here coming up fairly soon that they're going to want to either re-sign or, um, and they're probably going to have a luxury tax situation. So if they don't want Hendricks back after that third year, then they can go ahead and put that $15 million in 3 years, um, rather than pay it up and pay it over that fourth year. That's definitely a luxury tax thing, but this is a good deal. Like I say, I think Hendricks is getting his payday that he definitely deserves. And that 2020 season, I'm telling you, he only pitched in 25 innings, but
hmm
that's like a 2017 Kenley Jansen, 2017 Craig Kimbrell level season, a
absolutely.
1.14 FIP, 13.14 strikeouts per nine, 1.07 walks per nine. That's just absolutely insane. And also 2019, he put up almost 4 wins above replacement, which is one of the highest I've ever seen from a relief pitcher, at least in the in recent years. Back in the day, relief pitchers used to throw a lot more innings, and that number would be higher. But since that's 80 innings, I believe, so that's an insane number. So
Well,
good for Hendricks, and
and even in that 2019 season, he wasn't the closer, and he still saved 25 games.
yeah,
I mean, like they
yeah,
had Blake Trinan, who we talked about
right,
last episode. He was the closer at that point. I mean, he had a
yeah,
fantastic 2018, and then Hendricks in 2019 just kind of basically took the role over. I mean, halfway through the season or something, still saved 25 games and put up that. Like that's ridiculous.
yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, it's a good move, and obviously the White Sox needed it badly to replace Alex Colomé, who in the free agency. So, um, we
I
did
mean,
have
they
another. What's up?
still could resign Colomay. Who knows? I mean, I know you've
Yeah.
seen maybe they don't, but I
Well,
mean,
they might. But at the worst, I mean, it replaces him. At the best, it just adds to
Mhm.
a good
Yeah,
reliever. So,
we talked a lot about the White Sox this year,
yeah,
anyways, them taking that next step. But this is kind of one of those moves where they're saying, okay, we're ready.
yeah,
Because you don't give a contract out like this if you're not ready. The Yasmani Grandal contract they gave out before that, they kind of had to do that to get something, to kind of kick that off. But this is the contract that says like, hey, we're going for it now. Like
yeah.
we're here.
Yeah,
So
it reminds me a
that,
little bit of the Braves signing Will Smith last offseason.
absolutely.
So
But I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to see the White Sox, maybe jump in the Trevor Bauer market, maybe jump into a high-end starting pitching market. I mean,
we'll
who
see.
knows?
We'll see. You never know.
No,
So
yeah, our next guy we had sign was Kyle Schwarber, who we've talked about was non-tendered by the Cubs. He signed a 1-year, $7 million deal with the Nationals, which has a 2022 option that has a 3 million buyout. So he's guaranteed $10 million for this season, or he'll get $11 million that next year.
yes, Kyle Schwarber is a guy who has had a interesting career for sure, up and down, a little inconsistent. 2020 was probably his worst season in his career. He hit 188 with a 308 on base, which isn't terrible, and a 393 slugging, which is pretty easily the worst that he's had. Only a 90 WRC plus. This is a guy who in his career is a 113 WRC plus. Um, 2018, 2019 though, he combined for 5.8 wins above replacement, so an average of almost 3 per season, which is a pretty solid regular. In his career, he's a 230 hitter with a 336 on base and a 480 slugging. He's got 121 career home runs and 9.5 wins above replacement. This is a guy who, you talk about Kyle Schwarber, you think big power, big strikeout, big walk. He's got a 13% career walk rate, 28% career strikeout rate. Obviously, those 121 home runs, a 480 career slugging percentage, high power. He's a guy who has showed sometimes that he can actually not be that bad in the outfield, but in other times he's not the best out there. Um, so it'll be interesting to see what he does in Washington. I think this is a little bit weird for Washington because Juan Soto is a left fielder all the way. There's no way Juan Soto can play right field or center field unless you just want to tank your defense because he's not a very good defender. As good as Juan Soto is with the bat, which he's outstanding, he's not a great defender. So if we don't have the DH this coming season, which it looks like we won't, where's Schwarber going to play? Is he going to play first?
No,
Is Juan
they
Soto going to play first? Is there?
no, they
The,
they've said the plan is for Soto to play right field and Schwarber to play
well,
left.
yeah. So I mean, if that's the plan, I don't know. Soto will have to make a lot of improvements in the field for that to be something worth doing, but we'll see. I would not move my cornerstone player off his position to even if it is just one corner to another to compensate or to put a guy like Schwarber in the lineup. But we'll see if it works out. It may. So
I,
um,
I was I was scratching my head on Schwarber being the pick anyways. I was thinking more of a right-handed bat that
yeah,
they needed. Because right now, I mean, you have Trey Turner, who's probably setting your leadoff spot because you don't have another guy who can do that. I mean, I
right,
would pick Victor Robles to do that. So then at that point, your 3-4-5 or your 2-3-4 right now is looking like Juan Soto, Josh Bell, and Kyle Schwarber. Like you
yeah.
have no other righties in that.
You need
Like yeah,
another right-handed bat. So
like Victor Robles, Kyle or Starling Castro,
those names
Kurt
don't.
Suzuki, like those names in
Those names
right-handed.
don't give me any fear with the bat. I mean,
Exactly.
there's a couple good defenders in there, but they're not, you know,
Right.
that
So
yeah,
their name, they have Carter Kieboom supposed to start at third right now, but their name to maybe watch out for. You've heard him in Chris Bryant trade rumors. You've heard him in Eugenio Suarez trade rumors. You've heard about, possibly Justin Turner. I mean, you've heard them in that right-handed pitching or the right-handed hitting market. Um, but it's going to have to be somebody who plays the infield now because you have no outfield spots left.
right.
So Schwarber was an odd pick to me. Obviously he could have a bounce back year, and you just got a fantastic pickup for $7 million. I mean, uh, saying that he got $7 million when I think he was supposed to make 8 or 9 through non-tender or through arbitration this year. It's a little head scratching.
Yeah. Well, it's 10. I mean, because of
Well,
the opt
technically,
out. So
yeah. So I mean that the Cubs didn't even try and trade that. You
yeah,
know, it's just. Schwarber to the Nationals was a weird pick. I mean, I love the player. I just don't like the fit with this team.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think Schwarber's a better player than he gets credit for a lot of times, but um, I just don't know. I just don't know about this move. And like for the Nationals, I guess there's not a huge amount of risk here because worst case scenario, you're paying him $10 million just for 1 year, but um, you're getting to a situation where you got a lot of holes to fill in that Nationals lineup and their starting rotation soon, depending on health of their pitchers, which has been very inconsistent last couple years, a couple aging pitchers in there, and then you throw in the fact that their bullpen's pretty consistently below average the last few years, even in their World Series run. Um, you're looking at a team that it just feels like Schwarber is the type of guy they could have added, or not necessarily Schwarber himself, but a similar type of player, somebody they might would have wanted to add last year or the year of their World Series run, or a year or two before that. And feel like this year is just kind of, I don't know. I don't think this is gonna make them any more of a contender than they already are. I mean, which is if everything goes right for them, they could, with their talent and their pitching rotation, they could maybe still contend, if they're fully healthy all year and stuff, but I just don't see it. So,
Maybe if they do make a big trade for a right-handed bat or sign a right-handed bat, like to play that third base position, maybe you talk about them about potentially being in a wild card race.
yeah,
But
you could add them to a wild card conversation at that point, but right
that
now, I
NL,
mean,
I mean that NL East is a beast.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah. Well, I mean, they're not going to be, even if they add a Chris Bryant or something. I don't think they're going to
no,
be better than the Braves or the
no. My,
Mets.
my my
So,
point isn't NL East. I'm saying like to win that. I'm saying they're gonna have to face those teams a
right,
lot more and trying to win those games. Where if you're gonna have like the Padres and Dodgers, who we'll
right,
talk about here, facing the Giants, the Rockies, and the
yeah.
Diamondbacks.
Yeah,
I
well,
mean,
you're gonna have the Dodgers, Padres, and they're gonna have the Braves, Mets, or
yeah,
so the
or
losers of those divisions. If everything
exactly,
goes as kind of as planned, the losers of those divisions are gonna be the wild card teams. The winners of those divisions are gonna be obviously the division winners. So,
exactly.
you know, uh, it's gonna be really hard for me to see another wild card team come out of the National League. Other than, I think the real race is going to be in the NL Central to see who makes the playoffs, because I feel like the two NL East teams and the two NL West teams are going to be the teams to, that they're kind of, I mean, I won't call them locks because you never know what might happen in baseball, but assuming that they're healthy and they perform as they have, the players perform as they have, then they would probably be the four of the six playoff teams. So,
Well, yeah, and we're talking not expanded wild card right now,
oh,
not
absolutely,
expanded
yeah,
playoff, because that is not confirmed yet if that will happen or not. Most
yeah,
likely not.
yeah.
But
That's
this Nationals team isn't basically a team. They shouldn't be competing for a playoff spot unless they are like exceeding expectations by a huge amount.
right,
Like,
exactly.
so maybe the Schwarber thing is more of a sign in for this, and then you can trade him off, and maybe a contending team is looking for that at the deadline. He's a guy who might be able to fit that, a lefty bat, potentially a platoon bat at some point, and
Yeah,
not for that much. He's not going to cost that much, maybe $11 million. It's not going to be bad. And
yeah,
the
and
10
to
million
that,
this year, and then 11 million the next year.
yeah.
And if you're not in a pandemic filled year, I mean, that's just standard.
Yeah, and to
So,
that point, Schwarber is definitely a platoon candidate. So, maybe a team that has a good, left fielder, that's struggling against left-handed pitching or something, or I mean, against right-handed pitching.
mhm,
Maybe you throw Schwarber in there. So,
absolutely.
all right.
But
Well, let's move on now. We're gonna have our NL West preview. It's gonna be a little bit abbreviated compared to our other previews because, well, for one thing, we've talked so much about these teams already
yeah,
in the NL West, and also, we've got we don't have a ton of time today, but with all these moves going on, but we'll start off, and I'll go ahead and you know kind of talk about them for a second and let Damien elaborate on these guys. But the Dodgers were obviously the World Series champions. They were also the division winners in the West last year. They finished with a 43-17 record. Um, and this is a team that they lost some pieces off that World Series team, but not a ton. Justin Turner has been a cornerstone for them for several years. They lose him. Obviously, he's up there in age too, though. So maybe he's not the biggest loss they could have possibly had off this team. I mean, he wasn't one of their top 2 players or anything. Um, they lose Alex Wood, who has been oft injured, but has been a pretty decent swing guy when he's pitched. They lost Kike Hernandez, who's been a really nice platoon player for them, a good and a fantastic, perfect utility bench guy in the big leagues. Jock Peterson, who's been a great platoon outfielder for them the last couple years. Pedro Baez, solid reliever for them for most of his career. He wasn't great this past year, but he's typically been pretty good. And Jake McGee, who is kind of one of their lefty specialists they had. So they're bringing back in their core. You're talking about one of the best cores out there: Bellinger, Seager, Betts, Walker Bueller, Kershaw. You can even add Will Smith to that. Maybe AJ Pollock and can't forget Max Muncy, who's been so good the last couple of years. So, Damien, what do you think they need to add?
Well, they need to add Justin Turner back. That's first and foremost. Not only has he been, like you said, a cornerstone, player for them. I mean, he's their franchise leader in many postseason categories. And but he's also, clubhouse leader. He's that team is so like I'm fumbling on words because of how mad are that they haven't re-signed him yet. But he is. I mean, he's not only is he a fan favorite, but the way that all those players on this club look up to him. I mean, even Mookie Betts, you would think that he would be the leader, or Kershaw even. And really, Justin Turner is that guy. I mean, he is one of the few player reps in the major leagues, and that he's on this team. There's people will look at that bad because of the whole way that the World Series with the COVID test and all that looked out. But I mean, this guy means so much to the team and all the players, let alone, a fan favorite and still a fantastic player. I mean, he is 34 and he wants a 4-year deal. Um, their Dodgers want to go 2, so it just seems like a likely thing to settle at 3 years. I would love for them to bring back Kike Hernandez too. He's a personality. That's the best way to put it. If you guys do not know who Kike Hernandez is, just go look at his Instagram and you'll see about the 10 different sides of Kike Hernandez that there is, because that guy does not have any sad part in his body. I can promise you that. Um, you know, like you said, one of the best cores around: Bellinger, Seager, Betts, Bueller, Kershaw, Muncy, Smith, Pollock. I mean, it doesn't get much better than that. Um, they can use that righty bat slash third base, i.e. Justin Turner. If they don't get him, they've been rumored in on DJ LeMahieu, on a Chris Bryant, even looking at it, Eugenio Suarez as well. Kind of the same people we were talking about with the Nats. They could use a lefty reliever. Really losing Jake McGee. Urias kind of cemented himself as one of the cornerstones in that rotation now. Um, and Scott Alexander, Adam Kolarek really doesn't do it. And really, can Dustin May and Tony Gonsolin take that next step into that? They were good major league pitchers, but can they turn into very good major league pitchers right now? Josiah Gray, he's a prospect that the Dodgers have that he might get his shot this year and see he's shot up boards ever since he got into their farm system. So not many pieces that a World Series team needs to really upgrade in or anything, but just some solid things. Bring back your own guys, maybe add a little bit of bullpen and get your pitching a little bit better. Which you could say it's a something they added because they didn't have it at all last year, is David Price. It seems like he's going to come back this season after opting out this last year. He just posted a video today saying better than I've ever felt before throwing a bullpen. So that's a need, or an add, I should say, to this team that they didn't even have last year, that was already under contract for them.
Yeah, the Dodgers they do have some needs, and I agree with you. Obviously, they're going to figure out third base, whether they bring back Justin Turner or sign somebody else. They'll have that figured out. Um, a left-handed reliever, they'll get that figured out, I'm sure. I think the big thing is going to be that pitching development and the pitching and the depth in their rotation, because you look at you've got 2 guys right now who are uh, just real established big league starters, Bueller and Kershaw, and obviously Urias pitched pretty well in the postseason. But he was kind of a swing guy for them. He pitched a lot of the bullpen in the past few years. He's pitched some in the rotation. He's been a little inconsistent. He looked good this past year. They're going to need him to keep working on that starting. Maybe start pitching a few more innings. Um, they're gonna they're gonna want to have you're definitely gonna want to see the biggest thing I think is you're gonna want to see Dustin May and Tony Gonsolin continue their development because Kershaw is I think he's still very good. He was obviously great in 2020, but you're still kind of waiting to see is he how long he's going to continue to be really good because he has had some of those back problems and he's been a little less dominantly consistently dominant in the last few years as he was for most of his career so far. So I do think you're going to want to start to see a Dustin May or a Tony Gonsolin or like you say the minor league Josiah Gray or even Urias become start to really cement themselves in that rotation. Um, I think one other thing that the Dodgers need to work on, and I don't think it's a huge deal because I think they got a lot of pieces there. But what are they going to do at the back end of their bullpen? Is Kenley Jansen still going to be their guy, or is it going to be Trinan, or is it going to be Bruce Sader, Gratterall, or who's it going to be at the back end of their pen? So, um, obviously the Dodgers, defending World Series champions, are a great team, but it isn't without any question marks. There's a few things that they need to they're gonna need to iron out before the season, but they'll still be definitely a contender this coming up year. Um, so the team that finished second though is the team the Dodgers are gonna have to look out for big time to hold off. That's the San Diego Padres. They lost to the Dodgers in the wild card round. So Damian, what are they looking like? Losing who are they lost? What their core needs? Who are they? What they looking like next year?
Yeah, they lost a big piece for them has been Kirby Yates. He didn't really play much for them last year, but he's been one of the best closers in baseball for the past, 2 years before this season. Mitch Moreland, who's, kind of was a bench bat that they had who kind of started off and on at first base sometimes, especially when they had the DH. He was a guy who really started for them there. Um, Trevor Rosenthal, Garrett Richards, who were two guys who pitched out of the bullpen really. I mean, Richards started some, but was really a swing guy. Jurickson Profar, who, they've kind of replaced him now with Ha-Sung Kim as the starting second baseman. They honestly, this core rivals the Dodgers core. Fernando Tatis, Manny Machado, Dinelson Lamet, Tommy Pham, Yu Darvish, Blake Snell, Ha-Sung Kim they just added. Jake Cronenworth even, is added to that core. Their needs really, I mean, on the offensive side, I mean, just maybe some bench bats. Maybe, I mean, there's not much they need on the offensive side of the ball. It's just going to be how well do they all gel together, and really their bullpen. Their bullpen is their biggest need right now. This is going to be their Achilles heel. They don't have many good pieces down there. I mean, you have Emilio Pagan, who was okay. You have Drew Pomerantz, who was very good last year. Matt Strom is okay, but Timmy Hill, Craig Stammen. I mean, those guys aren't guys you want pitching for you in meaningful innings in October or even in a stretch run. And then some starting pitching depth. I mean, we've talked about having Yu Darvish, Blake Snell, Dinelson Lamet, Chris Paddock, but they lost Clevenger. He's not going to be there this year. Is Joey Lucchesi going to be your number 5? And if that is, who's going to be your next guy up? When is Mackenzie Gore going to come up? Who else is going to be in the starting rotation if you have a guy go down or multiple guys go down? We've talked about Darvish having his health issues. Nelson Lamet wasn't always healthy. Chris Paddock hasn't looked good this past year or so. So where are you going to go with that rotation wise? Starting pitching and bullpen.
Yeah, I agree. And the more that I look at this team, the more I'm worried about their pitching, and not because I don't think they've got the talent, because I think their 1, 2, 3 punch right now is possibly, it's up there with among the best in the National League. But I am worried about Darvish staying healthy at 34 years old. I am worried about Blake Snell staying healthy because he missed most of 29 or not most of, but a portion of 2019 with injury or 28. It was 2019. Dinelson Lamet missed the playoffs. I'm a little bit worried about his health. And, is he going to be as good? Because he was fantastic last year in the shortened season, but he didn't have quite as long of a track record as these other guys. Is Chris Paddock going to develop? I mean, he showed in the first half of 2019 that he had the chance to be special, but ever since then, he has been a home run giving up machine.
Hmm.
So I'm a little worried about this rotation just because I think the names are there, and I think they got a chance to be really good. Obviously, they're missing Clevenger, which hurts but I think they got the potential to be very good. But I think health is going to be an issue. Obviously, in their lineup, Tatis and Machado are as good of a 1-2 in a lineup as you see out there. And then you've got Tommy Pham, Trent Grisham had a breakout year. Austin Nola is a very good catcher. Jake Cronenworth had a solid rookie year. What are you going to get out of Ha-Sung Kim? And are you going to have a good year from Eric Hosmer and Will Myers or a bad year from Eric Hosmer and Will Myers? Because I think both of those guys are going to have a big effect on this season for them. So the Padres, if all goes right for them, I think they've got a higher ceiling even than the Dodgers if all goes right for them. But I think there's a lot more things in there that could go wrong for them than there are for the Dodgers. So this is going to be a very interesting division, in my opinion. And I think these are going to be the two teams to battle it out in the NL West for sure.
Oh
Definitely the
yeah,
two most talented teams out there. And you talk about them easily being, obviously being two of the top four National League teams and probably being, two of the top three right now if you look at just true talent. So um,
yeah.
I
Both of
think
these teams should not have an issue making the playoffs, especially
right,
playing in this division against these three other teams that we're getting ready to talk about. Just they are not good,
yeah,
and playing each of those teams 18 times a year. If you don't win
yeah,
at least 10 of those games, then maybe you don't deserve it. But I think they should
absolutely,
easily be able to win, beat these teams very handily.
absolutely. So the first of these three teams that we're going to talk about is the San Francisco Giants, who finished who
Sorry.
finished 29-31. Narrowly missed the playoffs. They actually believe they tied with the Brewers, right? And the Brewers finished 29-31, and the Brewers had the
With the Reds.
tiebreaker.
I think it was the Reds. Weren't the Reds the
I
last
think the
wild card?
Reds were. I think the red. No,
Oh
the
no,
Reds were the
that was
number two wild card
the
because they
Brewers were
played the
facing the Dodgers.
Braves. So
That's right. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah, the Reds were or the Brewers were 29 and
yeah.
31. So the Giants lost on a tiebreaker. And the players they lost were some pieces that they relied upon. Drew Smiley's probably the best player they lost. He signed with the Braves early in the offseason, but he had a very good year last year, coming back off of some injury issues. Um, they also lost Tyler Anderson, Jeff Samardzija, which contract really helped. That really helps the contract situation. Trevor Cahill, who's been a consistently mediocre big leaguer, but a big leaguer nonetheless for a long time. He's an experienced guy. Tony Watson, who at times pitched really well out of their bullpen, um, and then Chadwick Tromp, who has showed some flashes last year. Um, Daniel Robertson, and they lost to retirement Hunter Pence, who that's not a very big loss for them for his current talent, but that's a piece that has been around baseball for a long time, so it's worth mentioning.
Yeah,
Um,
and clubhouse guy and fan favorite
Oh,
there as well.
absolutely. So their core though, they've got a lot more talent than I realized they had in their lineup. Mike Yastrzemski has been very, very, very good, and last year had his real breakout year. Brandon Belt showed last year that he's still a solid first baseman, and he put up a great year. They still have Buster Posey. I don't know what they're going to get out of Buster Posey, but he opted out last year, didn't play. But he's another one of those leaders, and he can always have a solid. He's not going to be terrible regardless. And then you've got Evan Longoria, who's he's all right still at third base. Brandon Crawford actually was pretty good this year at the plate. Surprisingly, Wilmer Flores is a solid player. He's back this year. Johnny Cueto. pretty good. Mauricio Dubon, pretty good. Joey Bart is a piece that's coming back for them. He'll be probably start off in the minors to start the season with Posey coming back, but he's a guy who they will rely on in the future as a top 5 overall prospect in baseball. And then Kevin Gossman on that qualifying offer that he signed, um, had a big time bounce back year last year. So there's some pieces here for the Giants, more so than the other teams at the bottom of the division here.
Yeah, they've been a team that they could be they held on a little bit too long in their window. With the belt, with the Posey, with the Crawford, Longoria. I mean, even when they had Bad Bum, this
Yeah.
team really needs to start the rebuild, get these bigger contracts off the books, like a Johnny Cueto, Evan Longoria. Eh, eh, just push those off and just start that rebuild. Farhan Zaidi, you can't blame him when he first got there. He had the Will Smith and he didn't trade him because they were doing so good at the time. Probably should have traded him and got something for him. But it's a team that they were very successful for a decade, and they were trying to hold on to that and run it back with their players again and have one more shot at it, and it just didn't seem like it's going to work out. Especially now with the Padres jumping ahead of them. I think we could say pretty easily in this division. Yeah, I think it's time for the Giants to just hit the reset button and figure it out. A lot of these guys only have 1 or 2 years left on their contract, so maybe let them play out through this season, let those guys go, and try and trade the other ones. But I think Longoria is signed for like another 3 years or something. So they got to try and figure that out. I mean, if you're talking about what this team needs to be better in 2021, possibly a lefty starter. All their starters right now are lined up to be right-handers, so they could use that. I mean, you can use an outfielder to maybe, they've been playing Alex Dickerson around in the outfield. Hunter Pence was still playing in the outfield. They've tried Mauricio Dubon in center. Sometimes Mike Yastrzemski's been in center. You just don't know. So maybe you can use an outfielder and just bullpen. I mean, we're going to say bullpen for every team pretty much, but this is a team who really, they are very, very depleted down in that bullpen.
Yeah, and to your point about the Giants and holding on to their guys too long, I really, I know I would have said that when it happened last year or 2019 when it happened. Um, I would have said they held on to their guys too long. But one thing that I've kind of changed my stance on that, and maybe the Royals 3 or 4 years ago when they held on to their guys when it looked like they probably should trade them, because I watched a couple weeks ago in the last NFL game, and Damien knows what I'm about to talk about. The Philadelphia Eagles quite obviously tank in their last game of the season, completely intentionally pull all their players because the game was close, make bizarre fourth down attempts and passing up field goals that would have tied the game, and so they were obviously tanking to get the higher draft pick, and it's kind of a little bit like throwing away a team like the Giants or the Royals a few years ago that they're not going to make it. I mean, the Giants in 2019 were not going to make the playoffs, even though they won a few games in a row and walk-offs and stuff. The Royals a few years ago around 500 at the deadline with their last year, their core, they weren't going to make the playoffs, but you think maybe you want to hold on to them, but that's a good way to lose an organization and lose confidence in guys. And when teams look at the Giants, they're looking at a team now who, they're still trying to, they tried to go for it still. I mean, they're going to be very well respected by the players that the front office is supporting their team in the big league field, and you know that's something that I think we lose sight of a little bit in these trades because um, the Giants, year before last, I think a lot of players are very willing to go there to restart a new wave of Giants. Um, because a couple years ago they held on to guys and they still went for it in a year where they probably weren't going to make it. I think that does help them a little bit in free agency and just in the fact that players want to go there because they know they'll be supported by the front office. It's different in some places. Like you go look at the Indians right now, and I mean the Indians were really good this year. They made the playoffs. They had two of the best players in baseball, and they're trading everybody away. Who's going to want to go play there now? I mean, that's one of those things where I think that hurts a team's uh, a team's reputation a lot more than people kind of expect. Even though the smart thing when it comes to math and numbers and stats and everything is to go get those extra prospects, trade those guys, or get that draft pick. Sometimes that at the long run, that reputation is can be rough. So just the one thing to throw out there when it comes to the Giants, and obviously I don't think that has quite as much on them this year because they're quite obviously in rebuild slash retool mode right now. But um, that's just something
Well,
to maybe look at in their future.
I mean, maybe, but in baseball, this is a particularly well-known thing. I mean, what the Eagles did,
Oh
that's something
yeah,
that doesn't happen in
yeah.
ma
Well, it's not a
in
perfect
sports.
comparison, but I think
But
sometimes reputation wise,
even then, like, this is a
it
team
can
that
be.
maybe if it's reputation, but I mean, you look at it, and this is a widely accepted concept around the game. And they had just got new management. They had got this, and they're facing the consequences now. I mean, if you didn't trade those guys, and now you have a really weak farm system, and you still have all these high contracts, nobody's going to want to come sign here right now because this team's not able to compete for a win. And you've hurt your franchise for the next 5 to 6 years while you're trying to rebuild that farm system back up, and you're gonna have to try and go out to the free agency market and pay guys to come in and do that. Like, I just don't. The Royals are going through it right now as well.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
look how bad they are. They're still
yeah.
going through a full rebuild, and the Giants haven't even accepted that fact yet.
Right.
Like,
Well, the
so
Giants they should do it in the off season is kind of my point. When you go into the middle of the season and your team is in that last wild card spot or right at 500 and just a couple games back, sometimes tanking the season at that point makes it. I mean, obviously, I'm of the belief that if you're probably not going to win in baseball before the season, you should trade veteran pieces and try to rebuild. And that's what the Giants are in right now. But I'm just kind of talking about at the trade deadline. If you are in it, it's hard for a lot of times for your reputation if you start just trading all your players away. If you're the number 2 wild card team or something, that can be, even if your talent's probably not good enough to make it. I think that's kind of my point. It's not necessarily the fact that rebuilding is bad, because obviously rebuilding is how you turn franchises around these days. I mean, you saw the Cubs do it back when they won their first world title in 100 years. You saw the Braves do it a couple years ago. They've been really good. You've seen the Padres and the White Sox right now start to turn the corner and become really good teams. Those are all results of rebuild. Astros, even if they might have cheated, they did it through a rebuild. I mean, that's kind of that's definitely the wave of how to do things. But at the same time, sometimes if you are in it, maybe they should have traded those players before the season. Is kind of my point. So, but I definitely am in the. I mean, if you can trade any of these guys, I think most of them are untradeable now. Though we were talking about their salary relief needed. Cueto. I mean, I
well,
don't think you
that's sort of
can.
my point is they've held on too long to where these guys aren't
Right.
tradable anymore. Like, at that point, you're saying let's go for right now. Let's see if we can get a wild card berth. But were they realistically going to win a World Series? No.
Well,
And then
no.
because you took that wild card shot, you just set your franchise back many
Right.
years. You
But
can't. There's
you're
no
talking.
but. In it.
Well, I
There's
was gonna
no
say, but you should have done it before the season.
no, because before the season, you were still thinking you had the shot, and then you get
No,
there,
I don't
and
know.
you're at the point, and you're like, oh well, now look, like we're a decent team, but we're not good enough to do anything.
I
Oh,
don't
let's
think they really. I don't
like
think they really had a shot before the season, but at the World
I mean,
Series, I mean, at a wild card spot, maybe sure, but you
it
know,
was Farhan Zaidi's first year in there. He's
yeah,
not going to come in there and in the off season just trade everybody
yeah,
away. Like that's one way to lose a team is go in there and do
yeah,
that. So he gave him half a year, and
yeah,
then I mean,
yeah.
I
Well,
I
it's
don't think it's a good move for them at all.
yeah,
But we've spent way too much time on the Giants,
right,
so that's
yeah,
fine.
for sure, because they're not very, they're not. I
So
mean, they're in purgatory right now. I think is the best way to put it. But
let's
the next two
let's say let's
teams
move on
here,
to the Colorado Rockies, who they finished
Yeah.
26 and 34 this year, well out of a playoff spot. And then they non-tender guys like David Dahl. They're going to lose Matt Kemp, who is my favorite player from the Dodgers, Dodger legend. Uh, Daniel Murphy they lost, who was a big free agency signing for them at the time, but kind of forced,
Kind
has
of
been
was
forced to
terrible
miss,
this year.
well, not just this year, but he's forced to
Yeah.
miss a lot of time with injuries.
Yeah.
Um, Kevin Pillar, who was decent for them. Tony Walters was a catcher that they DFA'd as well. Um, you know, they they're in the situation where we were just talking about with the Giants. They're in a team that they need to make the decision like yesterday. Um, they have a core of Nolan Arenado, Trevor Story, Charlie Blackmon. Those are three really good major league, players. Blackmon is a good major league hitter, not so much defender. They have a solid 1, 2, 3 in their rotation: John Gray, Herman Marquez, Antonio Senzatella. Some decent prospects with Brendan Rodgers, Garrett Hampson, and Ryan McMahon was a top prospect at the time. He hasn't really panned out yet, but there's still a lot of hope for him. But this is a team who Nolan Arenado has an opt out after this season, and they've shown no willingness to win or to try to win, and so he's most likely going to take that opt out. So you have to trade him before you lose all leverage and get nothing back for him. Trevor Story, your second best player, is also a free agent after this season. Like, you are a team that's not going to win right now. You need to make the decision to trade them and get something back and help your farm system and start that retooling process and not be like the Giants and hold on to where you're not going to get anything for these guys.
Yeah. I'm 100% of the belief that they should trade Trevor Story and Arenado if they can. The only problem with Arenado is that whatever the Rockies get back, I don't think they're going to like the return quite as much as they could because Arenado's got such a huge money deal. I mean, even if he does, I mean, if he opts out at the end of this year, then that's fine. But that also means he's a rental. So he's either going to be a rental or you're going to be stuck with a gigantic contract. So I think Arenado is going to be very difficult to trade. Not saying it can't be done, and not saying they shouldn't try it, but because they definitely need to try it. But he's going to be tough to trade. And Trevor Story, though, I mean, he's one of the best shortstops in baseball. I honestly think Trevor Story has turned into he might be almost as good of a baseball player as Nolan Arenado at this point. They're both. I mean, not, and that's no negative toward Arenado because
Right.
I just think Trevor Story is really good. But like you say, they need to develop. A couple of these young guys. I think Brendan Rodgers probably has the highest ceiling out of them. Um, maybe you can get something for Charlie Blackmon as well if he has a hot start this year. You got John Gray. He's been rumored uh, to be on the trade block forever, but you just don't know what he is. Is he a Colorado? Is it a Colorado problem there, or is he a guy who just doesn't mesh well? Because he's at times had really good, um, really good fielding independent stats and peripherals, and his strikeout walk rates have been good. But this past year he took a step back. So it's hard to tell. Marquez, I think they should trade because I think he's one of the best pitchers in baseball if he gets on a team that's not the Rockies. But Senzatella has some value now. They got some guys they could maybe get value for. I just don't see it. The Rockies have put up too many bad contracts over the past several years and have stuck their foot in the ground on too many players that probably shouldn't have been. Um, Probably they shouldn't have done that with. I think the big one that people will remember is Ian Desmond. He wasn't there this past year, but still, that's a guy who was a bad signing when he was signed, and it got even worse. So I think you worry about that, and for the most part, that's just how the Rockies have been for a while. I think they need to double down on some of their. They need to work on their ability to identify talent and bring in the right guys because sometimes they've been really reckless and put themselves in tough spots money wise. But a team that next that has they're not quite in the same situation as the Giants or Rockies. I think the D-backs are in pretty good rebuild mode right now. Although they do have some pieces that they could still move, um, but they finished last this past year in the division in the NL West. They were at 25-35. It's a tough season. They lose Junior Guerra, John Jay, Mike Leake. Um, they lose Hector Rondon, the relief pitcher. Jake Lamb actually they lost during the season, as well as Robbie Ray. But I went ahead and put those guys on their lost list because they had been there, as cornerstones for a while. Their core, they got some good pieces there. David Peralta is a very good piece. MLB The Show legend. A solid left fielder or outfielder in general. Good left-handed power bat. Nick Ahmed's a pretty solid infielder. Put up a good season this year. Cole Calhoun actually was their leader in wins above replacement this year. He was very good this year. Christian Walker's a pretty good bat that's been playing a lot of first base. He's a solid player. Maybe somebody to could help them out in the future. Um, Obviously, last year they signed a big contract to Madison Bumgarner, which was I would have told you at the time probably not the best decision, but it got even worse with his performance and injury issues. But they have a couple of pretty good pitchers, Zach Gallen and Luke Weaver, who had a bad year this past year, but has shown some talent in the past, as well as Merrill Kelly, who actually was pretty good this past year, even though maybe he doesn't have quite the talent. So, in my opinion, they need just to add in the offense. They need to add a third baseman. They lost Eduardo Escobar. I believe they non-tendered him, right? Um,
Did they? I
or
didn't see him.
maybe they didn't lose him. I'm not sure, but either way, he really struggled this year. So, I think they could probably add at third base. Also losing Jake Lamb, who had played third base and first base for them at times, and they could use an outfielder. They traded Sterling Marte last year to the Marlins, so they could definitely use an outfielder. Their bullpen they could add rotation depth. If they went for it this year, they'd need a little bit of everything. But I think the big thing, they need to keep working on their farm system. I mean, you got a couple pieces in Peralta and Ahmed, maybe Cole Calhoun that you could probably trade and get back some solid farm pieces. They've got, I believe, on MLB Pipeline they had 4 top 100 prospects right now, but their system isn't super deep. They need to just keep working on that because they have a good start, and they need to keep working on making it better. Um, because I think that's probably where the D-backs are going to have to go to become get back to where they were a few years ago, is go through rebuilding via the farm system. So I don't know if they're going to be the type of team that can go out and sign a bunch of big name free agents. They can sign a couple. We've done it in the past. They signed Bumgarner last year. They signed Greinke several years ago. Um, they've been able to make a big splash in free agency, but I definitely think that they're a team that's going to need to go the farm system and trade and draft route for their rebuild. So but there's some optimism there for their future for sure.
Yeah, they have solid pieces in the rotation, like you said. Zach Gallen and Luke Weaver are very, very good pitchers in my eyes. Bumgardner, he's probably not what he used to be, but I think he could still be a solid major league pitcher. I think he had a worse year than what he really still is. Um, and when they traded Paul Goldschmidt, they got Carson Kelly and Luke Weaver. You didn't really do much to help your farm system, like you said. They got major league pieces. Kelly was technically a prospect at the time, but he came in and was immediately their starting catcher. Um, so it's going to be a thing where you have to trade your guys that are cornerstones for you, like your David Peralta. Maybe, I mean, depends on where your timeline is. Maybe you think about moving Ketel Marte. I mean, I wouldn't right now, but maybe down the line in a year or two, maybe that's something you do. If you don't think that your timeline is going to fit up with him being successful or having to re-sign him, still. So, like you said, they're going to have to do it through draft. They're going to have to do it through trades, but they don't have much to trade either. And the pieces that they do have to trade, you're not going to trade a Christian Walker, Carson Kelly, Zach Gallen. You're going to have to trade you know decent guys.
It would
And
have to be probably Peralta, Ahmed, Calhoun
yeah,
type
and
guys.
how much is Ahmed? I mean, really going to get you? I mean, he's really good defensively, and he's really started coming around offensively. But we've talked about the shortstop class the next year coming up. Um, and where does Ahmed really fit? I mean, obviously he's nowhere near that category.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, but still he's going to be below those guys.
Oh, for sure.
And then you look out to the market right now, and you have Marcus Simeon, Didi Gregorius, you have Andrelton Simmons, you have guys like that who probably going to take all of those guys ahead of Nick Ahmed as well. So now you're talking about a an MLB average player at that for that position wise, and
Yeah, I think
what you're really going to get for that.
Yeah, I think if you look at Nick Ahmed, you're looking at a guy who's probably somebody who would fetch a lottery ticket type young pitcher or something in return. I don't think he's. I mean, and
Well,
but on a discount note, you could probably get him for not having to give up a ton. He doesn't have a big contract or anything, and the
right,
D-backs could at least get a piece. Peralta and Calhoun, I think, are the more intriguing ones because Calhoun was really good last year. Peralta has had a good last several years, so you could probably get a couple of pretty good looking prospects for those guys. So maybe not something like on the return that Lindor got or something like that, something crazy. But I mean, you might be able to fetch a top 100 for Peralta, and for Calhoun, maybe a top 10 in somebody's system, in an average farm
right.
system. So
Right. So, but then like that proves the point is what's that really going to do for your farm system or for your major
yeah,
league team? You're getting these guys who are going to be,
yeah,
they're not going to be your stars. They're going to be probably okay major leaguers, if major leaguers at all. So,
yeah.
they're going to really have to up their, draft and development side of their, their team and their farm system so they
Yeah,
can.
of course, finishing last will do that. So,
Exactly. So we've rambled way too long and stuff about this stuff already. So we will wrap this episode up and catch you guys next week.
yeah, thanks for listening, everybody.